amount of money. She got $200,000 in these compensatory damages, plus punitive damages of $2.7 million. And the $2.7 million equaled 2 days of serving McDonald's coffee sales. And again, this was done to punish McDonald's because they knew that this coffee was served at unsafe temperatures. There had been a number of complaints before, a number of other people injured, yet they continued to do this. So that's what we mean by types of damages. All right. So what we've done to this point is we've talked about intentional torts, we talked about defenses to intentional torts, especially defenses to the ideas of assault and battery, and we talked about damages. Now we want to talk about non-intentional torts, or the idea of negligence. So what is negligence? Well, negligence is different than intentional torts because, as we said, the tort feasor in intentional tort deliberately performs the wrongful act. But in a non-intentional tort, it's a failure to act as a reasonable, careful person would, which leads to injury. So you didn't intend to hurt anybody, but your action was negligent, causing injury to somebody. So when we talk about negligence, what we need are a number of things. We need someone to be careless. Someone to fail to act as a reasonable, careful person would under the circumstances. And then we need this action to cause an injury to someone. So the cause of action has these elements. First, did the defendant owe a duty of care to the victim? Secondly, did the defendant breach that duty of care through unreasonable conduct? And thirdly, did the plaintiff suffer an injury as a result? And when we're saying did the plaintiff suffer an injury as a result, as part of this we have to ask, did the defendant breach the duty of care required causing the injury? So was their negligence the direct and proximate cause of that injury? And these are the kinds of things that we have to look at. So, you could have a situation where I'm repairing my sidewalk. So I dig a big hole in the sidewalk and I leave the hole there and I don't rope it off, I don't put cones, I don't put any warning. And I'm doing that because the next day I know I'm going to have to put some rebar down, I'm going to have to put some more dirt down, and then I'm going to have the cement poured. And I'm not too concerned about anybody walking on it. And then my neighbor is walking their dog at night, they're walking down the sidewalk, they come to that part of the sidewalk, there's a huge hole, they fall in the hole, they break both legs. So am I guilty of negligence? And the answer to that question is probably so. So did I breach a duty of care? Yeah. It would have been reasonable, obviously, a reasonable person would have done something to warn people or, put some kind of flags around it or cones around it so people knew. Was there foreseeable harm to that plaintiff? Yeah. Anyone who's going to be walking on the sidewalk could reasonably be harmed. Was there proximity between the act and injury? In other words, was the breach of that duty of care the legal and proximate cause of the injury to plaintiff? So the answer would be yeah. And therefore, that would be an example of negligence. Now, in most negligence cases, one of the major debates comes about as a result of this idea of causation, or is something the actual and proximate cause of the injury? Now, when we talk about the actual cause, we're talking about cause and effect. Did the injury happen because of the defendant action? Well, and even if it does, what we find in some cases, that that's not enough. That it has to be seen as the proximate cause. It has to be seen as legally foreseeable. So a plaintiff must prove that the defendant's negligence was foreseeably the cause of the injury. So that sounds confusing. What do we mean by that? Okay. So the book talks about a situation where you have an individual who buys a brand new car. And I think this one is on page 302, if I remember right. Yeah. So let's read this case. Brent Starr. It says, Brent Starr was testing the power of his new sports car on a clear 2-lane highway in good weather. When he reached 90 miles per hour, he lost control and the car crashed through a fence and into a high voltage electricity pole. This caused a short circuit and a power failure throughout the city of Berkeley, which was 100 miles away. Among the many persons affected were the staff and doctors in General Hospital. Just as the power went off, surgeon Ramona Ramirez was making a critical incision near the patient Albert Johnson's heart during open heart surgery. As a result of the darkness and the loss of the power to the essential equipment, she had to stop abruptly. The machine supplying vital oxygen and pumping blood went silent. Within minutes, Albert Johnson was dead. Is Brent Starr liable for Johnson's death? This sounds like a crazy case, but these kinds of things happen, okay? So here this guy is trying to test out his new sports car, loses control of it, hits a power line, makes electricity go out 100 miles away in a hospital just as they're performing open heart surgery, the person dies. So does the family get to sue the sports car driver, Brent Starr, in negligence? Is this foreseeable? That's the key question in a negligence case. And look how they answer the question. They say no. Starr is not liable. Starr's wrongful conduct was the actual cause of Johnson's death. So what they're saying is, but for what Starr did, Johnson would probably be alive. But under the actual cause test mentioned previously, it can be said that but for Starr's folly, Johnson would not have died, but he did. But Starr's act was not the proximate legal cause because it was too indirect and remote from the death. So it was not reasonably foreseeable by Starr. He couldn't foresee that by speeding on a highway, he's going to kill someone in a hospital 100 miles away. Now, if there was someone at the side of the street repairing a flat tire and he lost control of his car and it smashes into that, is that the proximate cause? Is it the actual legal cause? Is it foreseeable? And in that case, I would say it's probably all of those things, and the person would be held for negligence. Okay. So hopefully that gives you an understanding of how you got to deal with these different elements in regard to negligence cases. Well, there are also defenses to negligence. So let's talk about those. Every state has these defenses, and they usually go into two different categories: contributory and comparative negligence. Contributory and comparative negligence. Okay. So let's define what we mean by contributory and comparative negligence. Contributory negligence holds that if two people are involved in an accident and both are negligent, neither can recover damages, despite the relative contribution. So in other words, say Brent Starr was going 100 miles an hour down the road in the residential area, and I'm backing out of my driveway, but I don't have my tail lights on, and it's nighttime, so he doesn't see me, and he smashes into me at 100 miles an hour, and I'm paralyzed as a result. Well, in states that have contributory negligence statutes, neither person, if they were negligent at all, could recover. Now, most states do not have contributory negligence anymore. What they have is this idea of comparative negligence. Comparative negligence. So when we talk about comparative negligence, what we're saying here is that it works a little bit differently than it does in the context of contributory negligence. For comparative negligence, what we're saying is the court and the jury has to decide how negligent each party was. So if they say, yeah, you know, Brent Starr was 90% negligence and I'm suing for $1 million, okay, what they could do then is reduce my award by 10%. So that's what we mean by contributory negligence. You assign the degree of negligence to each party, and then you offset it in the award of the damages. All right, hopefully all that makes sense to you. Now the last thing we want to talk about are possessors of land as defendants, or what we refer to as premise liability. So what we're saying here is that the ownership or possession of real estate creates duties and imposes burdens. And the duty of care that we as a landowner owe to someone depends upon the defendant's conduct and the status of the plaintiff. So in other words, is the defendant a trespasser, a licensee, or an invitee? Those are the three different associations of property that someone can have. So a trespasser is owed a minimal duty by the landowner. Basically, no traps. They need not warn of dangerous natural conditions, but if the trespasser is known to be on the premises, there is a duty then for them to warn of man-made risks, like an attack dog or something like that. But generally, a landowner owns a minimal obligation to a trespasser. A licensee, this is a little bit different. A licensee enters a person's property and remains there with the implied or express permission or consent of the owner for the visitor's convenience or benefit. So what does that mean? So what we're talking about is kind of a social guest. Someone comes to visit me. They are a licensee. Okay, they're there for their own benefit. They want to see me and talk to me. I didn't necessarily invite them or care if they were there or not. So to a licensee, the defendant would have a duty of reasonable care, but not a duty to inspect for dangerous conditions that are not obvious. So if there's a crack in my porch and I don't realize it and I don't see it, and you hurt yourself by falling through that baseboard, then I would not be held liable because I have no duty to inspect for dangerous conditions that are not obvious. However, once I know of a danger, I must repair them or the licensee must be warned. Okay, the last type is an invitee. This is a person who enters land or a building after invitation for a business purpose that benefits the owner of the land or the property. So for example, we're talking about someone who's shopping at a store. They're there to buy your product, they're there for your benefit. Patron of a restaurant, patron of a hotel. And these people are owed the highest duty of the care. You must inspect for any dangerous conditions. So those are the three major approaches. And I'm going to stop here. And if there's any confusion, take a look at the book and look at the examples. And if you want to send me any questions, I'll be more than happy to elaborate. Thank you.